Hello everybody! We are in the UCLA garden called Mildred Mathias Garden, where I have spent many happy hours using this and other tools. And this was my first section called the East Stream Path. So now I'm moving so that the camera can see. This section of the path is canopied by this wonderful trees along the stream here, and that's why I picked it out for my section. And the other way is also canopied, shade, beautiful, wonderful shade. So you can see the leaves along the path, am I right? Okay, so I'm going to rake those, and it'll be before and after of kind of what I do in the garden every week and sometimes twice a week. Now, usually I'll have a mask on. That's the general idea. Of course, I do much more than that. And then an amazing thing happens after I'm done. The leaves start to fall on the path again. And I'm sure that some of you watching this will come up with the words to express what's happening other than entropy. Somebody shared entropy with me last night. So, and then it's job security for me. This is ruscus, this bush, which is 30 feet long and about 8 feet wide. And every fall, this happens to this bush, which is the magnolia and the other hardwoods drop their fun stuff on the bush. And for 8 or 10 years, it's been my job to fix that. So I'm going to show you how I fix that. First, you comb the top of the bush. And that gets a lot of the leaves. And then, I don't know if you can see that hole there, but you comb the top of the bush. Now, that got some of the leaves now, but I want to get all the leaves. Okay, so here's the coup d'etat, coup de grace. You put the rake in there. Now, ruscus is really strong, so I'm not breaking any branches. Can you see the difference? Presto changeo. It looks clean to me, at least the section that I did. And then I would go all the way down there and get all the rest of it. And yeah, it's highly aerobic. Cleaning the ruscus bush. Now let me show you this, if you can pick it up. This little red berry here. She has beautiful little red berries here and there. And these leaves are like holly, but not as bad. So sparrows make their nest in there. I haven't disturbed any active nests, but some of the old nests did come out years and years ago, and they're pretty neat, you know, sparrow nests. So sparrows use it for shelter, you know. And that'll be enough for this bush. So, many happy hours are spent here. Now, in the garden, like I get exercise, selfless service, and beauty. It's a hell of a deal. And the garden gets to look better. And they don't have to pay me. I'm a volunteer. I've been a volunteer here 8 or 10 years. I don't know how long. And I've been a docent here 2 or 3 years. And there we are. And I love it. And sometimes I'll come twice a week if I need more exercise or if the garden needs me. And I always come once a week. And that's it for the Ruscus Bush talk. Dawn redwood, long thought to be extinct, found in China in the 40s by University of California people. I don't know how they found it because there was a war in China at that time, but they did. And they brought the seeds back, and they were distributed in 48, 49, and 50 to the various gardens around the U.S. And so from a seed, from a little seed like off of a pine cone, this happened in less than 67 years. And you can't see the top of this, but later we might show you the top of this. Now, it's still green. This isn't an evergreen, this is a conifer. It's not evergreen. This is actually a deciduous tree. Deciduous comes from the Latin word deciduo. That's approximately the word. It means to fall down. So, like right now, I don't know, can you see the leaves falling right now? But the tree has not turned brown yet, but it will. And it'll start at the top and come on down, and the neighbors may give us a phone call and say, could you cut down your dead tree so we don't have a fire hazard? And of course, in the spring, it'll become a green tree. So the director of the garden taught us when he was teaching us docents, there's always an exception in the plant kingdom, okay? And there is the example of the exception. Because we think conifer is an evergreen. No. And then there are evergreens that are not conifers. And we have those in Santa Monica along 20th Street, and they form a nice canopy along 20th Street, and along my street, which is 21st Street in Idaho. Same thing. Camphor trees are big with broad leaves, not with these kind of leaves, and they are evergreen, which is kind of wonderful that the leaves are always there on that tree. Okay. Redwood, an incredible building material, you probably know that. Fire resistant, mold resistant. If you go into a redwood forest, you'll see some trees that are burned in the middle up 40, 50, 60 feet. They're charred and they're still alive because the redwood resists the fire. It's not fireproof, obviously, but it does resist fire, and it still is able to live with the inside burned out. And, there's two other kinds of redwoods. There's the gigantus redwood, which is in the Sierras. Those are the biggest trees in the world in terms of volume. And then there is the coast redwood called semperavens. Semperavens, that's the Latin name for it, Sequoia semperavens. Every plant in the world has a Latin name, and then they have some common names. But they have a Latin name so that people all around the world can say Sequoia semperavens, the California coast redwood, which is our state tree. And it is not the biggest tree in the world in terms of volume, but it is the tallest tree in the world in terms of height. So there's a tree in the redwood forest along the North California coast that is 379 feet tall. Now, a football field is 300 feet long. So if we laid that tree down, it would cover the entire football field plus another 79 feet. And there you go. That's Amazing how they get their water and nutrients up to the top branches. So, most people know that some of the redwoods are 2,000 years old and some of them may be almost 3,000 years old. So this redwood has grown to the height that it's at, which maybe we can show you later, because we'll have to go way back to see how tall it is. In 67 years, this redwood has grown to this height. That gives you an example of the prolific nature of the redwoods, which is demonstrated in the enormous trees in our forests. This redwood used to be prevalent in North America, throughout Western America, until a few million years ago. I think 15 million years ago, it started to go. And this redwood was thought to be extinct till they found them in China. And redwoods were throughout the world in the temperate zone that they could live in for millions of years. And then in the last few million years, they have receded to the clusters that they are in now, which is, as far as I know, California, Central California to Northern California. There's a few trees in Oregon. Oregon got a few redwoods. And then there's trees in China. And I'm sure there's trees in the arboretums throughout the United States. So we're on the west stream path now. The east stream path is right over there. And there's the stream. And there's big koi in the stream. And about 30 turtles. Red-eared sliders, I think they're called. They're all the same kind. And there are a few crayfish in the stream, but they're rare. They're rare to see them. But I was here 2 or 3 years before I saw my first crayfish in the stream. I'm standing in front of the building block of Asia for centuries. Asia, millennium. Asia was built on this, bamboo. And they used bamboo for everything except for one thing. And I'm going to show you what that is. This is from southern Thailand, a teak leaf, T-E-A-K, and they use these as shingles, okay? And then the bamboo itself did everything else, the flooring, the walls, the framing, the binding. They stripped bamboo into strips and made it for binding when they didn't have nails. Now these days they would use nails. So think about this. I spent some time in Thailand. Wonderful place, wonderful people. This is how they lived for thousands and thousands of years in these, and then later, they got to fell the teak trees and make houses out of frames, and then later there was concrete available. But for thousands of years, this was it. Totally green. Kind of neat, huh? Completely green. Bamboo plus teak. And I have a picture of an enormous building made out of teak leaves. That is, the roof is made out of teak leaves, and some of the walls are made out of teak leaves. Now the other thing is that, believe it or not, bamboo is so strong that they use bamboo for scaffolding in Asia. I have a picture of about a 30-story building. It has scaffolding all the way up, and the scaffolding is nothing but bamboo. And I just think that's amazing. I don't know how they did that. And I'm going to put down my teak leaf now. And over at my house, we have fig trees behind the house. And I want to bring a fig leaf and show you what, because they always talk about a fig leaf, I'll show you the nice shape of a fig leaf. Bamboo, prodigious, just will take over an area if you let it. And it doesn't grow up from here, it grows up from the top. So this stays the same, unfortunately, with the people who are deluded into thinking writing on the bamboo has some kind of meaning. So that stays there, and the bamboo grows from the top. Okay, now I've been looking at, we edit the film as we go along. Now I've been looking at what I look like, and I have battery packs here, okay? And it's making me look fatter than I am. Now, I am fat, I don't mind telling you that, but I'm not this fat. Okay, now let me show you. You see that? Now, we had a longtime TV personality here on PBS called Neal. He would say something like this: "Hi, I'm Neal, and I am the dumbest Okie that you have ever met in California. But I have perseverance, and so I have made like 500 shows of beautiful California and gotten paid for it by PBS, KCET, and all that." And Neal would say, he would come up to something like this, and he'd have somebody who's showing us around the park, and she'd, "Now what is this?" Now, and then of course the person would say, "This is a table. This is what we call a square table." A square table. This is a square table. And what do you do with the square table? You put stuff on it. Am I right? And now, this is another part of the West Stream path. I do this path as well as the path in front of the bamboo. I'm going to walk down here now. I'm walking towards the bamboo. This is my third section. I got the East Stream path, the West Stream path. This is called the main road, and it goes that way as well. But from like where the shade starts to the other end where the stairs are, that's my third section. Of course, they have to have shade. So this is a beautiful, even more beautiful stretch. And in this stretch is the coastal redwood and several other plants of interest. But the main thing I want to show you is the difference between a wet dirt road or dirt path and a dry dirt road or dirt path. Now, this is 1 day of leaves or less, like what's happened here. So this road gets raked every 2 or 3 days. Here we are on the main road. Now, the whole thing about the garden is beauty, as well as it's a teaching garden. There's 4,000 plants here from around the world. But for most of us, and for me, the garden is about beauty. Now, I take it a step further because I work on the paths and the trails and the road. This is the main road. And the difference between the dry road and the damp road in terms of aesthetic nature is substantial. And I'm going to demonstrate that now by raking both areas, okay? And sometimes I do work this quickly. It's a sprint. I usually have a barrel, of course, and the leaves go into the barrel. I don't feel like I need to show you that. But what I do want to show you is this. If it was all the way wet, the damp section is much more beautiful than the dry section. And this is only a partial illustration of that. Now, I told you about the Sequoia sempervirens. here it is, and there's that word, the Latin word, and that's the coast redwood. That's the name of the coast redwood. Throughout the garden we have brown signs saying usually the medicinal purposes of the plant, but in this case the commercial uses of the plant. Over here we have Bushman's poison. Bushman's poison. This is one of the reasons we tell children don't handle the leaves when you come here, because the leaves are toxic and will burn or damage their skin if they break them open, etc. This, of course, was used by Bushmen in Africa to tip their arrows with to inflict a fatal wound. For my English friends, here is an English yew tree, Y-E-W. This tree almost went extinct in Europe because this tree was used to make bow and arrows. And then gunpowder came along and this tree recovered because they switched weapons to gunpowder. But it's very flexible, and that's why they use it for bow and arrows. Now, here we have the brown sign, the medicinal purposes, anti-cancer. And it names the 3 types of cancers that it addresses. And then another thing Huel would do, are you getting this, Louis? That was one of his phrases. Are you getting this, Eric? Eric's my cameraman. Here's my trash cans. All the leaves would go in these 2 trash cans from my 3 areas.
Hi, Neal. I am going to ask you some questions on your video, and so I've been thinking a lot about it. So my first question is, it's something around like, you have been so, you've been located in a place that so many of us don't know for so many years, like the experience where you describe being close to death for so many years, and you've traveled that edge in a way I don't think that many people would have the courage to travel and keep the open heart that you have. And so my first question is, what's it like there? And then and there's a way that it seems to me like you've tapped into something while being there that's really deep. It can take you through experiences that just sound at times, to be honest, grueling. And again, you keep that open heart and you keep that vision. And so what's that like, that thing that you've tapped into? And what, if you had to say like one message from that place, what would it be? And then my last question is something around the garden and the love that you have for being in that garden and working that garden. And I thought maybe you could describe what it's like for you to be in there. Okay. I love you. Talk soon. Bye.
Well, I just listened to Nicole's questions, and there's 3 questions, and I'll just try to speak to whatever part of them I can speak to. Yes, being close to transition for several years. You know, cancer patients have an opportunity that other people don't have to. So I was talking with one of my best friends, a spiritual man, and I said, if this happens and this happens and this happens, I may die. This was 24 years ago. And he says, so what if you do die? I know that he wasn't being mean to me. He was setting me free from my fear of death. And the answer was, so what if you do die? And the answer to that is, I was fortunate to live in an ashram for several years in my 20s. And I feel like I had experiences there that showed me who and what I am, and that I am an eternal self and incapable of death, and I feel safe in that realization. So first of all, losing the fear of death is a great freedom. I urge any of you to try to get there, any of you who haven't gotten there. there is no death, really. There is no death. There's the appearance of death, and we certainly drop our bodies, but there is no death. And in the East, Buddhism, Hinduism, they teach reincarnation. We go from life to life, and that's what happens, in my view. That used to be in the Bible. The reincarnation chapters used to be in the Bible. They were taken out in 330. It used to be in the Bible. A lot of things used to be in the Bible. They're no longer in the Bible. Anyway, that's then. This is now. We go from life to life. And in the East, people know that they're going to suffer by going from life to life, and so they want to get off of that cycle, which is called getting off the wheel of birth and rebirth. That's a goal for millions of people in the East, and it's called getting off the wheel. And they are taught, unfortunately, it's impossible to get off the wheel. You have too much karma. In a million lifetimes, you couldn't get off the wheel if you worked hard. You know, stuff like that, which is complete falsehood, delusion, probably people in charge of religion using it to control other people. I know people who have gotten off the wheel, and they did it in one lifetime, just by working, steadily through the decades of their life, applying themselves. And they may have come in at a level that provided that springboard to them, but they didn't come in really high. You can get off the wheel if you want. It may take another lifetime plus this one, or you may be able to do it in this lifetime. That's my experience. That's my practical experience. How do you do it? You just start to work. And I'm in AA. I have sponsees from time to time. I'm in Al-Anon also. They ask me, what meditation should I learn? Because in the West, no one's taught meditation except for specific people who seek it out. And I tell them, ask your higher self what meditation, what spiritual practice to follow. Ask persistently and listen carefully. Don't judge the answer, and you will get your correct path, your God-chosen path, your soul-chosen path for the moment. And it'll be perfect for you. And it may last a lifetime, or it may last 5 years, or 1 year, and then you may feel the need to go on to another modality, spiritual technology, whatever you want to call it. Don't stay with something which has become stale. Whatever you're doing spiritually has to have traction. It has to work. If it doesn't work, let go of it and ask your soul to show you the next step for you, and it will. So the first thing is to know who and what I am. So and then Nicole asked me, what's it like living in that space? Well, there's a freedom actually in living in that space. And of course there is a certain fatalism as well. I'm not making long range plans. Who knows, maybe I'm living now in the moment, maybe not. I want to try to go on, what's my message from that place? Start working. Start working now. Work with your own soul, and then your soul will lead you to teachers, maybe, or books, or whatever, or maybe you'll just sit by yourself and start to get elevated. It's not a theory. It's something that happens. It's something that's available, and there's millions of people in the West and the East who know this, so I'm not saying anything new, and of course I know very little, and I am sharing my experience. Now, what was the next question? About the garden. Well, I did describe some of the greatness of the garden. My son said something very interesting to me when I described the garden to him, and I said, I really love that garden. And he said to me, and the garden loves you. Which a friend of mine said, well, that shows that your son is really getting it and that he's in a fairly evolved place himself. And I said, yes, that's true. He is. I love him. He is a spiritual being in his own right and has his own path, and whatever he's doing to find his way in life is perfect for him. And I love him, and I appreciate our loving relationship. Now, I went off on a tangent there about spiritual work, but what I said is really important. My sponsees are saying, you know, tell me where. I can't tell you which one. That would be actually wrong of me. That would be a type of malpractice of me. I can tell you this, that, and the other. I can name 7 or 8 that you may want to check out, but they aren't necessarily the ones that you should choose from. And so, you know, that's how I found my path. You know, I asked God, could you just reveal yourself to me? You know, and I said, God, I'm in such pain. I'm not going to make you come through a little box of my concepts. I'm going to take whatever method whatever way you come to me, I'm going to take that and run with it. A few months later, I found my first spiritual teacher. He was the last person you would expect to be a spiritual teacher. He saved my life. He showed me God within my own body. I lived in his ashrams for 5 years in America. I learned that what you do is you get up in the morning and you meditate. And you sit there until you get there. Now, other people may just want to sit for 20 minutes or whatever, and other people want to sit there for 5 hours. Those 5 years I spent in the ashram were the greatest, most important years of my life. They weren't the most pleasant, although having the darshan of my teacher was incredible, and he drew thousands of people to him by the bliss that he generated, and he was a real heart chakra master and still is. And then, like, transcendence doesn't always work for a whole lifetime for certain people who have a steep path, like I was given a steep path and having to work through stuff rather than transcend, which is often what a heart chakra master will do, is transcendence over the stuff rather than through it and discarding it. So then I found several other, over the next 25 years, several other teachers and spiritual technologies to use. And in the last decade, I have found Kriya Yoga, and the last 3 decades, I have found Kriya Yoga and also The Infinite Way by Joel Goldsmith, which to me is the perfect individual mystical path. Joel said there's no orders from headquarters because there aren't any headquarters. There's no rules, there's no religion, there's no requirements. And is there a shortcut on the spiritual path? In my experience, teachers are the shortcut on the spiritual path. Use them. And I told one of my favorite teachers, I said, there's a chapter, should be in my book, called Hitch Your Wagon to a Star. Hitch your wagon to a star. In the East, teachers are revered. And a teacher in the East isn't going to be doing his or her laundry. She's not going to be doing her own shopping. Most of the time, she won't be doing her own cooking. And all of that time and energy is now freed up to work with her students because she's the only person that can do that. There may be 5 or 10, 12 other people in the world that can elevate their students. But there's 6 billion people who can do all of that other stuff. So a student offers service which frees up the teacher to do his or her work. And by doing the service, the student sets up a cycle of receiving, giving and receiving. You cannot just receive, you have to give and receive. And there's a mosquito here, so I'm saying hello to him with my hand. And such is life. I'm right next to a stream. So that perfect exchange is set up. And one of the mistakes people make is they're not taught like service. And Paramahansa Yogananda said life should be chiefly service. So you want to know what to do? Do I want to know what to do? There is a great master telling me life should be chiefly service. That's what I do. That's what I do in the garden. I come here. It's my blessing. I probably would pay them to come here. I get so much out of it. And now I have this deep relationship with the garden, and I appreciate that. And the staff knows me and loves me, and there is some respect there as well. And I am one of the docents here, and blah, blah, blah. I'd like to be in the redwood forest, to tell you the truth. It's not that far away, but it's not something I can just, drop a dime and step on and be there. Buddha is quoted as saying life is suffering. Well, whether he said that or not, I think most people could agree that there's a great deal of suffering in our individual lives. So that's why we want to get off the wheel. This is a very dense situation full of good and evil, and bodies that need to be maintained and taxes that need to be made. I don't have to tell you all the limitations we have here. It's a wonder any spiritual work gets done. That's why people live in monasteries sometimes. This isn't really the age of monasteries, although I benefited greatly from living in a type of monastery called an ashram, which is the Hindi or Sanskrit word, for shelter or monastery. One of the reasons people avoid deep spiritual work or being in a monastery, an ashram, or in an intense relationship with a teacher who can transform you if you spend enough time with them. Real teachers can transform you. They won't take advantage of you. And you should give them money because they need money, and you're getting something priceless from them. Priceless! You should give them money. It will help you immensely. It is the greatest bargain in the world to give a teacher money. And you should also, and I'm using the S word here and I'm well aware of it, you should also give them service. And this will establish a relationship with you and a flow, an exchange with them, and they will take you so much faster along than if you tried to do it by yourself in a cabin in the mountains with a scripture. So, and now we have Joel Goldsmith has like 600 tapes. Paramahansa Yogananda has a number of tapes and videotapes, so you can experience his darshan directly. Looking at a film, you can feel it. And there's a film of him in India where he visits all of the great masters of India and films almost all of them. And you can see that. It's Return to India or something like that. And SRF has several films on who we call master, or Paramahansa Yogananda is a better phrase to use. The word master brings up the Antichrist in people, and the master, you're his slave, he's your master, does he own you? All this stuff, see? And all master means is master of oneself. Yogananda is master of himself. His closest disciple, Rajarsi Janakananda, is master of himself. And why do I say is? Because they're still alive. They're still very much alive. They're still very much available to us. The Infinite Way teaches who am I, where do I live, and Joy Powell also adds in where do I live and other things. Joel said something really important. There's no such thing in mysticism as an original thought. Therefore, we don't have to go back to Ramana Maharshi and say, he was the first one to use "Who am I?" And then Nisargadatta Maharaj picked it up and used "Who am I?" to become enlightened, to become free. In 2.5 years, I think he said, some really small amount of time like that. Now, he worked on it full time, but there's an example of somebody just taking a modality, immersing themselves in it, and getting free. Joel did spend time with Ramana Maharshi, and he benefited greatly by it, and he kept it secret because of the prejudice that exists in the West towards Eastern religions, and that they're somehow less than. No. And Hinduism is actually called the eternal religion, one of the very first religions. Where did Jesus go to get his enlightenment, to get his instruction? Well, he went to India. A lot of people are aware of that. And he was gone for, 20 years? And came back and became the great master of all ages. And we're grateful for that. Infinite Way teachers usually charge for their classes. Joel charged for his classes. There is a wonderful Infinite Way teacher who does not charge for her classes, and by doing that, she enables people who would otherwise be blocked from coming to the class by that tuition amount. And she makes it a love offering, which no doubt gives her substantially less financial remuneration for her class, but gives her great satisfaction and gives the students the availability to be in the class without feeling a financial block to be there. Isn't that precious? Such a teacher should be rewarded by the open heart of everyone that can feel that and make up for that difference of some people putting $20, $40 in instead of, well, a lot of the teachers now are charging $225, Infinite Way teachers. And of course, the other teachers that aren't Infinite Way teachers are charging just as much as they can get. The German fella who's enlightened and wonderful, Eckhart Tolle, I was told recently he was up to $850 a seat. So I don't have a judgment about that other than he's preventing some people from being there who want to be there. Maybe they have a way to apply to get in on a scholarship. Some of the Infinite Way teachers have scholarships. You have to find the way that works for you, and you have to lean on it as much as you can. Now, I have a friend who loves me, comes to me for spiritual work, and she's only able to do what she can do, and that's fine. You can't do more than you can do, and no one can be exhorted to give up all their desires and blah, blah, blah. It's a natural thing that occurs in life on its own. So we've come upon the topic of desire. Some spiritual disciplines and texts say that there's fear on one side of heaven and desire on the other. And these are the Scylla and Charybdis that you have to sail through to get to enlightenment, heaven, God realization, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. And it is attainable. It is attainable. And I keep saying that because we have been taught it is not attainable. And in the Christian and Judaism text, we are taught that we're so full of sin that we're never going to make. So in the West, that we're never going to make it. So in the West, we're taught that as well, not just in the East. Not true. You start from where you are right now and do what you can. How did I keep an open heart? I'm going to be honest with you. It's because I came into the little cancer adventure of 25 years now, the little cancer adventure with a little C, because it isn't a big C, it's a little C and it's a little adventure. But it has been 25 years, which is a substantial amount of time. I came into that fairly open-hearted already, awakened, fairly awakened to whatever degree I was awakened. So, and then I did have the realization of myself that I wasn't going to die and that there was no real fear of death. What I'm trying to get to is this. I was built the way I am built. That's how I keep an open heart. It's no spiritual virtue of my own. I'm glad we're covering that. There's no spiritual, individual virtue personal to me. There you go. I was built this way, That's the truth of it. And I have withstood what most people would call an incredible pounding of procedures and pain and challenges, and that actually started in my childhood with my dysfunctional family. That pounding started, and today I am where I am. Here's what I do. I do the next indicated step with the little C. And I follow my intuition and I just keep on going. Great surgeons have been a terrific help to me, and great teachers who treat me spiritually have been a great help to me. It's important to say that diet and exercise are so important for surviving a chronic illness. My second year with the little challenge, I read in a book in a health food store, no recovery without exercise. And that line just stood out to me in big, big letters. And I've got to find a way to exercise because I love being a slug. I was a professional meditator and I could sit still for hours. And guess what? I've got a body and the body wants to be exercised, and it's completely transformative to exercise regularly. Diet. Dr. Gerson of the Gerson Therapy taught me how to eat through his book, through his teachers that he left behind, because he died in the 50s. But he wrote a great book. There is a hospital in Tijuana called CHIPSA, and it's 7 floors in Playa de Tijuana, and they practice the Gerson therapy there and cure a lot of illness, especially cancer and sometimes diabetes and other things. Doesn't work for everybody, but it works a great amount of the time. So that's there. But are you led to do it, or are you led to do something else? That you have to figure out on your own. And not so much figure out. How about listening within to what your soul has to say about what you should do, what you should eat, how you should exercise, what teachers, what amount of meditation to do, where to live. It goes on and on. Listen, listen, listen. Now, getting inner guidance is hard work. Hard work. And the way to clear the channel so that you can hear inner guidance is by spiritual work. For me, meditation. For other people, it may be chanting. I didn't do a great deal of chanting, so I can't speak to that spiritual path. But I did do a great deal of meditation. It slows the mind down, and you begin to feel your real self, and you begin to hear the still small voice. Now, people who work hard at hearing inner guidance hear an actual voice. Now, other people may get intuition, and it may work very well for them that they feel the right way to go, the left way to go, etc., etc. But Joel and many people got an actual voice talking to them, and the way they got that was to be still and listen, be still and know that I am God. I wrote several chapters of a book, and the book was entitled How to Get Free. Free of the suffering of this world, free of the search for God. Actually, I said free of the search for God first, free of the suffering of this world. We want to get free from both of those things, but mainly free of the suffering of this world. We want to get free from that. Now, this is a message for some of the people who are listening to this tape. Some of my friends are listening, some of my family, and there'll be some other people listening to it who have somehow found it. And here is a message for those people and whoever want to hear it, have ears to hear, an open heart. Visitors keep coming by, so let's see if I can get this off. Here it comes for those of you open-hearted looking for this particular message, and it is from God, not from me. You can do this. You can do this. You can get off the wheel. You can become free of most of the suffering of this world. Not all of it. None of us have attained that. Even Jesus did not attain that. But 10 years ago, I used to talk in the Al-Anon group that I was in, that I was experiencing 2% of the suffering that I used to experience. 2%. Now it's about 12, maybe more. But it's the small end of the stick compared to the big end of the stick. Now, I got to spend a little time with Lorraine Sinkler. I got to go to her house 3 times, her apartment, I should say. Priceless time. Thank you, Lorraine, so much for that. I want to acknowledge my higher self, because when I came upon Lorraine's book of letters to and from Joel, I called her up and said, "You've written a really important book." And she said, "Well, I've written other books." And I said, "Well, this shows, instead of the theory of a spiritual master being on a cloud and invulnerable to everything, that all the stuff that Joel went through, the very, down-to-earth stuff he went through, while he was one of the greatest masters in the history of the world. One of the greatest masters in the history of the world. Some of Joel's classic tapes, there's 5 or 10 of them, or maybe more, I have listened to 50, 60, 80 times. And why? Because I get something every time, and that I didn't get before. That's how rich and dense his classic tapes are. And of course, every tape he made has great things to offer. Some of them stand out as tapes that you can really chew on the way I have chewed on them. I was talking about Lorraine. Okay, Lorraine said to me, the devil was willing to give up all of his tools except for one: discouragement. Because that's the most powerful tool the world negativity has. There is no devil, of course, but there is a most powerful world negativity. Now, let me give you an example of that. And Joel talks about how strong the hypnotism is. He uses the word hypnotism. That is, that we are hypnotized to thinking we are separate from God, a separate body, separate from everybody else, separate, and that's the illusion, that we are that, instead of I am one with you, I am one with myself, I am one. Now, the second or third spiritual modality, technology, I don't really have the right word for it, path, was A Course in Miracles. And also my second teacher came along with that. Do you know that A Course in Miracles was written by Helen Schuckman? She heard it in her inner awareness, her inner guidance for 7 years. She heard it, she would hear it on the bus, she would hear it on the subway, she would write it down. And Ken Wapnick was with her a great deal at that time, and he would tell to her, here it comes, get your notebook out. You know, I got to spend a week with Ken at his home in New York, upstate New York, with about 12, 15 other people. It was great. So Ken, took Helen's notebooks out of the closet where they were stuck after writing them for 7 years, and organized them, coalesced them into A Course in Miracles workbook, basic text, and teacher's manual. And there's some other pieces that came out of that also that aren't included as A Course in Miracles, and Ken told us about some of those. Now when I go online, I look up A Course in Miracles, all I see is Helen Schuckman, editor. Ken edited A Course in Miracles. I'm not sure if he cares whether he gets credited or not, but he has a tape where he actually summarizes the principles of A Course in Miracles, which is an astounding feat, but not as astounding as what he did to put the course together from Helen's notebooks, from the transmissions that she received. This is A Course in Miracles, please take notes. And she heard that for a month before she started taking notes. And then she took notes for 7 years. The person who wrote The Course in Miracles, who scribed The Course in Miracles, Helen Schuckman, had a saying that she said to Ken and other people, and here it is: I know it's true, but I just don't believe it. Now, if that doesn't illustrate how strong the hypnotism, the negativity, the sense of separation is for us in the world, nothing does. She wrote the thing for 7 years, and yet she doesn't believe it. I had a lot of willingness to do spiritual work in the 80s when I came upon A Course in Miracles, and I did do the workbook 5 times, and I wasn't at the elevation, to be honest with you, where I could get a lot of the very deep lessons that the Course offers, but at least it went in, and I became familiar with it. Now, what is this, 30 years later, when I look at the Course, I see how great the mysticism is in it. And I hesitated before I used that word, because the Course does say something like, this is not meant to reveal God to you, this is meant to remove the blocks to love's awareness, or something like that. Okay, so it's a removal. It is what it is. I took a brief break, and as I returned to this little taping area, my heart said, that's enough words. Go into what you really want now, which is the stillness, the experience of mysticism. that we are all so hungry for and is available. But there's a price of admission, and it is the willingness to do the work. My adventure with the little C led me to the two great spiritual paths, and I am grateful for that. And who knows if I would have found them without the stimulation of the little C adventure. But in the realization of oneness, it's about page 92, 93. Joel talks about three principles, especially to deal with problem people, or I should say people who present a problem. And the first is to realize that God constitutes individual being, their being, and my being. Their nature is godly. That's who they are, no matter what it looks like. The second thing is that whatever error, E-R-R-O-R, is being presented as a picture to us, it is not personal to the person in front of us or that we are thinking about. It did not come from them. It doesn't have its origin in them. There is nothing wrong with them. It is coming through them because to a certain extent, the world negativity operates on all of us. All of us. Now, some people very, very little, and other people are completely asleep and completely immersed in the sense of separation. So now we have impersonalized the era, that it's not of any person. What is the third and final step? And to me, this is where the money is at. This is the one where you need somebody who can really get up in the I, up in the I am that I am, up in the realization of God, to dissolve the era. And Joel talks about, he uses the terms carnal mind, and that there is no carnal mind, because carnal mind is the belief in good and evil. To me, more in my own language, it would be to have a realization of the Christ in front of that era, and that will dissolve the era, and it does dissolve the era. Now, having a realization of the Christ, or of ourself, our higher self, isn't 1, 2, 3 tiddlywinks, pick up a phone and call. It takes an elevation, and it may take a concentration and a sitting by oneself for a while to get to that point. But it will dissolve the era, at least on that layer of the era. Now, Joel talks about his reaction to being presented with really difficult claims from people he loves or whoever, and that one of his thoughts is, I've got to do something. I've got to get God to deal with this. And he said that was his natural tendency. That often is our natural tendency. Whereas he says the path to the proper treatment of such an issue is to know the truth, is to know the truth in ourselves and know the truth about the era. The truth is that God is, period, and I am. It's hard to elucidate this, but I'm willing to give it a try. There's no way to motivate God to do something about this issue. Our work is to remember the truth of being, which is that God is, or I am, and rest in that, stay in that. And there's the breath that Joel talked about, that signals the release that the treatment is complete. So I'm grateful that I just had a completion there. And stubborn claims, Joel says you may have to come back to again and again, for hours, for days, for weeks. There's the answer to that. But they will budge. They will dissolve. Many people don't know that Joel's books were given to sometimes executives in a company or workers in a company in the 50s as part of a way of elevating consciousness, and that Joel was recognized by people high up in government and in labor relations, and that Joel, when called upon to help settle a dispute that was going to result in a nationwide strike that had major consequences could get a result in less than 20 hours, less than, I don't know the exact time, but it's certainly less than 24 hours. People called on Joel for that kind of work. Lorraine made it clear to me that the infinite way is not for everybody. In fact, her exact words were, "This isn't for everybody." So we each find our own spiritual home, our own spiritual work in a different flavor, as long as we find it and find our way home. That's the important thing. An example of a spiritual teacher requiring financial support from her community is that Lorraine told me that she was concerned about money. And what she said was, imagine me with all I've done. Somewhat concerned, a little concerned. But she said, then I got with my accountant and he said that it was going to be all right. But I saw how grateful she was for any money that I could give her. It meant a lot to her. So don't forget your local or anonymous spiritual teacher. A lot of us have money. Give money. Give love. Here's a great example of money and spirituality. Paramahansa Yogananda knew many people were drawn to him, including people who had substantial wealth. And now I'm going to quote from letters that are in his book, that are in the book Rajarsi Janakananda, which is the story of Yogananda's first spiritual successor, who was president of SRF for 3 years before he died in 55, and a great, great saint. And Yogananda named him Rajarsi, which meant king of saints. Yogananda said in these letters that many people said to him that they were willing to give money, but they wouldn't, or that they wanted control to go along with the money. And so Mount Washington was in arrears, was in danger of going under, and would have, except for an anonymous hero named Rajarsi Janakananda, who was a millionaire in the 30s, which was an amazing accomplishment, and whose heart was open and had no problem writing checks from his heart to bail out Mount Washington, to pay for the Hermitage in Encinitas, and to pay for Ranchi in India, and probably a lot more that isn't itemized in those letters. And of course, Master's trip to India, 35-36, which he took with 2 or 3 other people. Rajarsi foot the bill for the whole thing. And Yogananda got to see his guru for the last time. And he got to travel India and visit basically all of the saints that he could come across. And those stories are in some of the books, but especially in the book on Rajarsi Janakananda. And what a difference he made. he was miserable before Paramahansa Yogananda showed him God inside himself and lifted him up. He was a miserable man, he said, despite his millions. And now, in 2017, we can go to Mount Washington, the Mother Center, the headquarters of SRF internationally. It's an incredible place. The energy is powerful because Yogananda lived there for many years, about 24 roughly. And it has one of the most beautiful meditation gardens I've ever encountered. It's small, and no doubt much of its beauty comes from Yogananda's energy. And it is a great place to go, and there are very few people there. Another thing is that Joel was concerned about money when he lived in Santa Monica and wrote The Infinite Way in Santa Monica. He lived at Washington and Euclid in Santa Monica, and he would walk on Montana Avenue to his office in Hollywood, which was about 3 miles. And he even writes about that, having to walk that because he didn't have car fare. Later, as he went around the world, everything was first class, the hotels, the planes, everything. And still, money was tight until the tapes started selling. That's the books did not like lift up his finances greatly. The tapes, selling the tapes, lifted up his finance, and that's in a letter. You can read that in a letter from him to Lorraine. So don't assume, let us not assume that these spiritual giants, let us not assume that these spiritual giants who are doing so much to set us free have found a way to manifest money and don't need our support. Quite often they do need our support, and it helps free them up to do their work. And the S word coming in again, they shouldn't be concerned about money because of what they're doing for the world. For the material-minded person, only a few people in the world can do what Joel or the teachers of the Infinite Way can do, or Yogananda or Roger C. Janakananda did. Only a few people. I don't know how many brain surgeons we have, but we have a lot. But we only have a small amount of people who are able to transform human lives and open hearts to God. And with that, I'll leave you with a meditation. A good time for a disclaimer. I'm not a teacher. I'm not practiced at what I just put down on this tape. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't cut and retakes done of areas that were rough or not clear enough. I know very little. A couple people did ask me to share in this way, and I feel like friends and family and a few other people might benefit by having this videotape. For friends and family and whoever else, I'm 66 or 67 now, and I can remember my trip to Asia in 1970 and subsequent years and decades, and you never think that you're going to get to 66 or 67, but you do. So that time does pass. And what have you gained in that time? Put things in the bank. Put things in the spiritual bank as well as a material bank. Those years will pass and you will get to be my age or older. Some of you probably already are. I felt like writing a couple of my relatives recently, and so I'll share what I wanted to say to them with you. You're not going to be able to take it with you. The money, the property, the cars, the people. You're not going to take any of that with you. What you will take with you is your spiritual consciousness, or in the case of people who have been working on spirituality, your developed spiritual consciousness you will take with you from life to life. So there is an eternal bank. There is an eternal treasure chest to put your treasure in. And you will take that with you when you transition out of this body. There's a hot tip, huh? So this is a good time to do a little bit on the little c, okay? So, what can I say? Well, I know people want to hear my kind of briefly how I can speak to them because of my little career with the little c. Well, it's been 25 years, and I've had about 18 surgeries under general anesthesia, and I've had about 22 or more Mohs surgeries in my dermatologist's office, and some of them were more difficult than the general anesthesia hospital surgeries. And unfortunately, I started with radiation in '93 in the 6600 X-ray rads from a wedged pair. That's the way they delivered it, from a wedged pair. It took me a year or more to get over the bulk of that, because of course the beam is ending somewhere in your brain. And I don't, just for your own reference, I'm probably never going to get over the totality of it. That was a mistake, but what do I know? The head and neck people pitched to me that it was less invasive than surgery. And of course, you don't know what, that surgery doesn't sound good. And then I've done immunotherapy, and I'm on a basal cell medication right now that works, but of course makes you tired, and I'm on the second month of it. And okay, so there is prostate cancer. 4 + 3 are the numbers they gave me for that. It is the least of my trouble. It won't seriously impact me for several years, maybe even 10, and by that time I will have moved on to my great reward. So I said no to a prostatectomy because my prostate still functions, and I want to have normal function in a normal life. Not what happens when you have a prostatectomy is no longer normal. I can do everything that, people 40 years old without any prostate cancer can do. So, all along the way, especially the last 5 or 10 years, I tell my doctors, I'm not looking to live forever. I'm looking to have a quality of life as well as I can in the years that I do have left. Now, other people who were presented with the prostate diagnosis that I had, which came from a biopsy, of course, and I knew them. They went ahead and had radical prostatectomy. They want to live to be 85. They want to see their grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you make your choices, you take your chances. Same thing with the tumor that's in my ear right now. It's not going to do me a lot of good to address it surgically at this time, and I don't know how to say that a lot of complications would develop from that, and it doesn't mean that much to me to address it. I've addressed that tumor many times surgically, and before that with radiation. You need to be captain of your own ship of recovery, not the doctors. You need to take into account what they're telling you, but not take it as law. And seek a second opinion whenever you need to. And I have benefited greatly from great surgeons. Find the best surgeons you can, and find a doctor who is kind and can interpret a lot of what is going on in the area that you're addressing. And he or she may not be a great surgeon, but they can counsel you and advocate for you and interpret for you. Change your diet. Look at the principles of the Gerson diet. It's a no salt, low fat, high nutrient, and coffee enema are optional, but I took them for a year. I ground down 100 ounces of raw organic juice a day for a year. I took about 3 coffee enemas a day for a year. A couple years ago, I had a surgery with the top ear surgeon at one of the major universities in this town, Los Angeles, that I'm in. So, not going to name that, but he told me if I had surgerized you in 2007, I would have given you 2 years to live. So, between the diet and the exercise and the great surgeons, and especially the spiritual work, I'm still doing pretty good. People say, that you're doing good and your heart is open, and how'd you do it? I don't know, other than I just did the next indicated step. And I used everything. Early on in my diagnosis, I read something by Yogananda that said, address your situation every way you can, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so I did my best to do that. Having spiritual, mystical help is inestimably is of great help that cannot be estimated. And many people get healings with spiritual, mystical help. A complete erasure And then doctors call that a spontaneous remission, whereas actually it was a spiritual healing, but they don't acknowledge that very much. Some of them do now. Doctors in Hawaii used to call Joel when they had a breech baby or something that was very serious in the operating room. And the work that Joel would do would solve it. And the mother wouldn't die and the baby would be healthy. This is documented. So I haven't put salt on food in 22 years. I have excised butter, except for a few times when I go to England, and I like the butter there and the cream. I eat a high nutrient diet, and I use carrot and apple juice. Fresh pressed and otherwise. Yeah, it's been a long day. I support you on your spiritual journey. You may not know it, but your chronic illness journey is a spiritual journey. Make the best of it. And so what if you do die? How about addressing that question? That may be the greatest blessing that your illness gives you, is so what if you do die? What is your next spiritual action? Meditation, prayer, chanting, whatever it is, homeopathy, classical acupuncture. Homeopathy, I should say, can be used to address very difficult emotional situations that will not yield otherwise. And you should investigate the whole picture of homeopathy before you take powerful remedies aimed at kind of major miasms within you. It will work if it's properly selected. But people should know that the healing crisis may be difficult. Now, I will counter that by saying it's only a few days or a couple weeks, and your healing will be permanent. But still, you need to know that and have a homeopath on board who can help manage your healing crisis. It can be quite powerful. Difficult emotional issues can be resolved through homeopathy as well as through spiritual healing. So I'm reaching the end of this. You can tell I'm a little tired. I support you on your journey to get free. And it's not necessarily about getting cancer free. It's about being free with or without cancer. And of course, every step of the way, I have taken the action to address cancer. I'm not a victim because I don't want to be a victim. I'm not a victim of my dysfunctional family, of this, that, and the other thing. I'm a victor. I'm a survivor, but more than that, I'm a victor over the tremendous impediments present in this world. I know that you have a way through your challenge. Would you let me know that for you? Hello? Would you let me know that for you? You have a way through your challenge. You may not see it now, but it's there. And if you just listen within, take the next indicated steps. And listening within is not always easy, but there is a way to listen within. And so what if you do die? You know, we're all gonna die, honey. Guess what? Nobody's getting out of here alive, and nobody's taking it with them, except your developed spiritual consciousness. So why not put some into that bank, your developed spiritual consciousness, because you will take that with you. All right. Have a happy day. Have an awesome now moment.